guys, it's Michaela and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to some very heavy opinions regarding induced labor. Now, I would like to point out that these opinions are purely my own, and I am speaking from my own experiences as well as my personal preferences for this time around. Before you make any decisions, I would advise you to speak to your healthcare providers, to do some research, and to make an informed decision based on what is best for you and your needs. And this is solely my opinion, that's all it should be. But getting into just induction in general, in a nutshell, I didn't really like my first induction experience. It was just not very good. There are a lot of things that were off, and I will get to that later in the video. I am not speaking on epidurals here. I feel like an epidural is an entirely different experience and something for a different video itself. But I did have one induction with my firstborn, and then I have two natural labor and deliveries, and I absolutely loved those two birthing experiences. The one with my induced experience just didn't quite feel right, and so the biggest reason why I didn't like induction is because it's just not natural. It doesn't feel natural. Induction is something that is man-made, and it's to simulate natural labor pains. It is entirely controlled by people, and I am by no means against using medicines and medications in the proper way, and I don't think that induction is a misuse of proper medications, but I do feel like they have their place, and I feel like when it's possible to not go that route, and it is controlled by people, the dosage and the level of contractions, it's fake, and it feels something that is not natural. Whereas when I went through my experience having natural labors, that felt right. It felt like the way God created my body to be, and it felt like my body was doing exactly that. They started off as painless and then gradually going up to painful and eventually excruciating. I mean, childbirth is no easy feat, but I could feel the early labor contractions, and I could feel just the gradual, and it was a comfortable experience going up to the part where it was uncomfortable. Again, labor and delivery and having a baby is not a comfortable experience. However, when taken out of the context of being used by a Pitocin-based induction, and there are many different forms of induction. I'm not really well versed on them. My kind of induction was a Pitocin based induction, and it was like that from the start to the end of my labor with my oldest. And even though it started off as painless, I could tell that it was entirely controlled by the medication that was given to me, and I did not like it. Whereas when I had my two natural labor and deliveries, I was ready for the intense pain at the end. I was ready to go through that mentally, physically, emotionally. That was all stuff that was there, and it just felt like the natural experience that God created my body to have. And I did have a very bad experience with my oldest. I was induced by her. Now, the reason why I was induced was because they told me I had low amniotic fluid levels at 40 weeks, which I feel like is a very valid thing. But her heart rate did drop after I got my epidural, and I take a lot of that into the doctor's hands. They decided that because I got the epidural, which, by the way, I did like. I enjoyed not feeling the pain anymore, especially on an induced labor. They decided that they wanted to ramp up the Pitocin that they gave me to try and speed up labor, because I didn't feel anything, not taking into account what was going on with my baby at the time. And her heart rate all of a sudden dropped. My doctors came in, all of a sudden I had oxygen masks. They broke my water too early because they thought because I wasn't feeling anything that it was fine. Again, not taking into account what my baby was feeling going through all of that. And that was not right, and that right there is definitely error on the doctor's part. But I feel like if I had been in an induced labor, they would not have even bothered to try to do that. If I had been in natural labor, they wouldn't have tried to ramp up the Pitocin for the sake of getting going, and that to me felt very, very wrong. And they decided to break my water too soon, and they had to put water back into me and put monitors on me. And you know, when she did come out and when I finally delivered her, I was able to deliver her vaginally, she came out not breathing for a minute, and I feel like a lot of that could have been avoided if the Pitocin was kept to a more minimum and they just allowed my body to progress naturally. Or I wish they would have wheeled me off to have a C-section and having to avoid all those routes, because for me, my mindset is I can handle surgery knowing that my child's okay when the risk is there for something to go wrong having a baby vaginally. And I feel like they should have just done that to avoid some of these complications when they were starting to arise. So again, I feel like if I would have just had an induced, or had a natural labor versus an induced labor, I feel like a lot of that could have been avoided. And yeah, you could say I could have just avoided the epidural, but at the same time, it's because I had an induced labor and they were giving me the Pitocin on top of the epidural that I feel like that happened. Whereas if I would have just gotten the epidural without the Pitocin, my body would have just done what it did, and nobody would have tried to do anything different. So not my favorite experience, not my best experience, and not one I would recommend having. There is a huge difference between natural labor contractions and Pitocin induced contractions. I was able to gauge my own pain levels when I had natural labor contractions. I was able to go to the hospital based on how I was physically feeling at the time, and I was able to do most of my laboring at home. Or with my second daughter, I was able to labor while I was shopping. I mean, I went shopping the whole day. My mom had to drag me to the hospital and say, "You are having this baby in the hospital, not in Hobby Lobby." So my joke with her is I literally shopped till she dropped, which is such a me thing to do, because I'm one of those people who, you get me shopping and I just won't stop. And then with my son, I was actually able to labor at home, and that was great. I was just able to kind of get last minute stuff done, hang out with my other children, and just kind of labor at home until I got to the point to where I needed to go to the hospital, and I did. And because of my 2 natural labors, I had a shorter hospital stay, which meant I could eat during labor, whereas with my first, I was induced. I had not eaten that day. I didn't get a chance to eat that day, and I was in the hospital for way longer than I would have been outside of that, because I had to be induced, because I was not dilated at all when they decided to start me on the Pitocin. I was just like starting from scratch, whereas I was able to just gauge myself when I needed to go to the hospital, and that was so great. And there were less complications with my other 2 children. I was able to have them. There was nothing crazy that went on. It was fine. It was painful, but it was fine. With my second daughter, I didn't get a chance to get the epidural. And with my son, by the time I got the epidural, I barely got it in time. Like, I got it just to where I could feel like the edge taken off, but I still felt everything. It just wasn't as intense as what it could have been. And quite honestly, I don't even believe in trying to induce labor on my own. I think that for me, just going about my day-to-day activities and letting my body do what it does and letting God decide when my body is gonna go into labor, I think is the best way. I didn't actively try with either my son or my daughter to go into labor. I mean, a little bit with my daughter, with my second baby, but with my son, my body just did it, and it was great. And quite honestly, you don't know what kind of risks there are by doing certain things. I mean, obviously walking and stuff like that, I don't see any issue with that. But when it comes to like taking in certain things and trying to do certain things to help do that, like, you don't know what the risks truly are. So I feel like just going about your day the way you do and allowing the baby to come when the baby is ready to come. And I am so thankful for that experiences. And quite honestly, with induction, I feel like anymore, like, they so push to have inductions. With my second baby, my doctor was like determined to get me in 2 days later to let me have an induced labor when I already knew I was in labor with her. And I ended up having her that night. But I feel like their doctors, the loved ones, even ourselves, we can all plan out an induction, which I get. It's a convenience and it's nice to be able to kind of plan it. But at the same time, is that really what's best for you and your baby? Or is it what's best for Or is it what's best for everyone around you? Is it what's best for family, trying to plan for childcare, which again, I get, but at the same time, it's not natural. I think in those moments when it comes to labor and delivery, like, family and friends know, those who you have set up for childcare know when the time you're due is, so they know to plan accordingly. Whoever's keeping additional children at the time, or whoever's planning on being at the hospital at the time, know to plan accordingly, with knowing that they can get a phone call at any time. It's not that inconvenient. So really, why are we doing this? Again, there are times where I feel like it is medically necessary. But I feel like God created our bodies to do this thing, so why are we going to try to make inconvenience for somebody else? Why are we going to try to induce labor at 39 weeks when baby's not fully developed yet? Or because all we know about a due date is that it's just a guess based on the first day of your last period. And yeah, they can gauge some stuff regarding measurements and stuff throughout the scans and throughout that first appointment, you know, your ultrasound stuff and your belly size, like, they can gauge some of that, but none of that is foolproof information. If you induce too early, my fear is that you're gonna go into labor and delivery and there's gonna be a part that's not fully developed yet, and then you are gonna have a NICU stay in a harder time and a harder labor and delivery, and there's just things that are just not ready to happen yet. Whereas, because I mean, there's always a lot of variables when it comes to when a baby's actually due, because they go off statistics, but not fully knowing when the exact due date is supposed to be. So it's about convenience, and it's do what's best for your body, do what's best for your baby's body. And in my opinion, I feel like a natural labor is the best opinion. Now I have had all hospital births. I do plan on having a hospital birth this time around. It's how I feel safest. I like having medical staff on standby in case something does go wrong. I've got a team of professionals around me. But I believe in allowing the natural labor and letting our bodies do what God designed them to do. Now, again, going into a couple of things where induction may be necessary when the risk of staying pregnant outweighs the risk of induction. Man, that's a tongue twister. So when the risk of staying pregnant outweighs the risk of induction, and again, it's research that you need to do on your own as well as talking to your healthcare provider. With my oldest, because there were low amniotic fluid levels, I feel like that was a valid reason to have an induction. However, now having been through a lot of that, I'm scared of a C-section than an induction, because at least I'm the one that's having the surgery, and I know that if there are complications or it's not worth staying pregnant, at least that I know that there's a bunch of medical staff right then and there able to look at her immediately, take care of my child immediately, and I'm the one that has to go through the scarring, and she doesn't have to go through the risks of having to go through the birth canal when there are things that could be factors that might not be in my child's best interest. So I would rather have a C-section than have an induction. I cannot speak on experience from a C-section. I'm not a C-section mama. I've had all of my babies either through induction or through natural labor and delivery. However, personally, I'm not scared of having to have surgery. If I have to choose between having a C-section and having an induced labor, I'm going to choose the C-section, because for me, that's my body going through that, and at least I don't have to worry about the risks of her having a baby naturally. Again, I believe that those risks are minimal because this is how God designed our bodies, and I believe that no matter where we're at, whether a C-section or a natural labor delivery, we will have medical team around us, surrounding us, and ready to do what needs to be done. But I feel like the risk of having a C-section is lower than the risk of having an induced labor. And again, with everything stated here, do your research. This is my opinions. This is what I'll share with those who go through this after me. And I don't know what this labor and delivery is going to look like. I know we had some scares earlier with some placenta previa with her being small, and that would have led to probably, if that would have continued, that probably would have led to having a C-section for me. At this point, we are planning on having a normal natural labor and delivery, and keeping in mind, I've told my husband about this time and time again, do not let my doctors induce me. Do not let anybody push induction on me. I do not want that, and I need you to be my advocate for me. Now, obviously, he will be. You know, he'll be the first one to stand up and be like, that's not really in our best interest. Or if the conversation does arise and the research has been done, my husband and I will have that conversation and ultimately make that decision together. But he is planning on being that advocate for me. And, you know, because my baby is measuring small, again, I don't know the full research on this, but I understand that I may be pregnant a little bit longer than I initially thought. There is a chance that we could go another week, and at that point I will talk to my healthcare providers and see what they say. But again, standing firm on, if I have to go an additional week being pregnant, I'd rather do that than have an induced labor at 39 or 40 weeks. Knowing what we know, and again, that, you know, my doctors have told me that my due date doesn't change just because some of these stuff came up. But if she does need a little bit more time to grow, I want to give my baby that time to grow. And if it comes to a point where the risk of being pregnant does outweigh the risk of having an induced labor, that's when I will further have conversations with my doctor about, you know, whether or not a C-section or an induction is what's best. As of right now, I would lean towards a C-section. I'm not saying that will not change. Watch, I'm going to do this whole video, post this video, and then eat my words later, which we all know how that happens. But as of this moment, this is where I've been at. This is where I've been at my entire pregnancy. This is where I want my husband to be with me at, which he totally will be. This is what the conversations I've had with my husband about what I want, even about what he wants for me and what he wants in this too. You know, this is his child, so he obviously wants what is best for both me and our child. And just making sure that whatever decision is being done is what is in the best interest of, first of all, our child, and second of all, me. And to be able to figure out what the best option is. But as of right now, we are planning a normal labor and delivery, natural labor and delivery. Whether or not we get an epidural, I don't ever decide till I get there and I'm in pain. Whether or not I want to continue or not. That seems to be the case where we're usually waiting till the last minute, and then our doctors are like, you don't have time, you should have said something earlier. But anyway, we'll cross the epidural bridge when we get to it. I'm not opposed to the epidural by any means. I think it's a way to maybe get yourself a little bit of rest before baby comes. But anyway, these are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down below. I'm curious as to whether you're pro-induction, anti-induction, don't really have an opinion either way. Or for those who have had a C-section and maybe an induced labor, I really want to know, what was your experience with both? Anyway, if you are new here, I do videos focusing on beauty and lifestyle. My goal on this platform is to share my love for beauty as well as my love for Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I am currently pregnant, if you cannot tell by the conversations in this video, so I've got a lot of content on that coming, and a lot more to come. Or I've got a lot of content on my channel already and a lot more content to come. Anyway, I will see you in the next one. Bye guys. And if you can't tell by the style of video, whenever I do a pregnancy video, I always decide to share a bump shot. So this is 27 weeks and 2 days pregnant. I am almost in the 3rd trimester, which we are excited for. So here's the cute little bump shot. I am feeling more pregnant. I am finding it harder to move and a lot more aches and pains, but everything, I am so thankful to be feeling. This is a part of the journey, and as hard as it is, I am so very, very thankful to be feeling like this, and I feel baby girl so often. It is so crazy how much she moves and flips in there. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye guys.